One day, a hostile sultan dispatched a letter to Queen Tamar, asserting that all women are intellectually inferior and demanding her surrender to become his concubine. Tamar's response was so profoundly unsettling that it remains unforgettable. Queen Tamar presents a perplexing figure to historians who struggle to reconcile her reputation for piety and benevolence with her involvement in numerous brutal conflicts. However, perhaps these traits are not mutually exclusive. Her devoutness may have contributed to her effectiveness as a powerful and triumphant queen in both military and civil affairs. Born around 1160, Tamar boasted an impressive lineage. The Georgian dynasty purported descent from King David of Israel, a figure of immense significance in Christianity. For Christians, this lineage was considered second only to direct descent from Jesus Christ himself. Despite her Christian faith, Tamar would proceed to engage in actions explicitly forbidden by biblical teachings. In 1178, at approximately 18 years of age, Tamar's father designated her as his co-ruler, thereby establishing her as Georgia's inaugural queen. Yet this designation was not sufficient for her ambitions. She desired absolute clarity regarding her intentions to govern with the same authority as a king. Consequently, she adopted the title King of Kings, marking the first of her many assertive power plays. Powerful individuals naturally attract those seeking power, and upon Tamar's ascension to the throne, numerous factions attempted to usurp her authority. One such individual, Kutlu, endeavored to establish a council intended to supersede the queen's rulemaking power. This initiative proved unsuccessful for those involved. On occasion, when individuals incurred Queen Tamar's displeasure, she would banish them to foreign lands. Thus, the politician Kutlu might have considered himself fortunate when she opted merely to detain him and subsequently imprison him as the figurehead of opposition. However, Tamar was not inherently merciless and soon extended leniency to Kutlu's supporters. Queen Tamar did not incarcerate all of Kutlu's faction, only Kutlu himself. She instructed the remainder of his followers to simply abandon their leader, concede defeat, and return home, which they promptly did. This episode illustrates less a need for her to assert dominance and more a demonstration of her inherent authority. However, her authority would soon be challenged again. After Kutlu's associates returned home, they experienced a misguided change of heart. They reversed course, marched back to Queen Tamar, and demanded the release of Kutlu from his prison confinement. Undeterred and unafraid by Kutlu's band of rebels' demands for their leader's freedom, Tamar dispatched two noblewomen to negotiate. The specifics of the women's discourse remain unknown, but judging by the men's subsequent reaction, it must have been remarkably intimidating. In short order, the two women Tamar had delegated to handle this delicate matter had the rebels prostrate, pledging allegiance and obedience to the queen mere moments after they had been poised to launch an attack. Upon Kutlu's release from prison, he and his allies once more attempted to implement their ill-conceived plan for shared power with Tamar. However, their schemes never truly gained momentum. Throughout this period, Queen Tamar engaged them in protracted discussions, allowing them to believe she was receptive to negotiation, only to decisively reject their proposals at every juncture. Tamar is remembered with such profound respect that she was once lauded as possessing the intelligence and courage of a man, a considerable compliment in the medieval era. Kutlu, in stark contrast, fared less well in historical accounts. One chronicler disparagingly referred to him as a boy and a mule within Tamar's court. And in the court of public opinion, Kutlu's political career was effectively over. However, Queen Tamar was soon to encounter a challenge that would almost equal her own formidable strength. A notable drawback of queenship during this era was the limited autonomy in selecting a spouse. Royal marriages were typically arranged to benefit the kingdom, decisions often made by advisors deemed more qualified in such matters than the queen herself. In Tamar's case, her aunt selected her husband. Nonetheless, Tamar might have initially been pleased with her aunt's choice based on available information about him. In some respects, Tamar's prospective husband, Uri, was not an entirely unfavorable match on paper. None of these factors contributed to a harmonious union, and Uri reportedly grew increasingly discontented over time. However, to assume Tamar passively endured this situation would be inaccurate. She undertook decisive action. Divorce was generally frowned upon in the staunchly Christian kingdom of 12th century Georgia, but Tamar refused to be constrained by societal norms. Thus, after 2 years of a progressively failing marriage, She approached the highly orthodox Georgian church leaders and petitioned for a divorce. Their response was remarkable. In 1187, Tamar remarkably succeeded in persuading the religious authorities to grant her request. Despite her own devout Christian faith, she was evidently exceptionally persuasive, as the Georgian religious leaders and all the nobles consented to proceed with the divorce, seemingly without hesitation. In retrospect, perhaps they should have deliberated more cautiously, as their decision would soon return to trouble them. Shortly after her divorce, she arranged for her former husband, Uri, to be sent into distant exile, specifically 800 miles away to Constantinople, a city in a completely different country with a different language. He did not receive this news with equanimity. Tamar enjoyed 3 years of blissful independence from Uri, but this period of tranquility ended abruptly when Uri journeyed back to Georgia from Constantinople and launched a coup against her, or at least attempted to. His coup attempt failed, and he posed such a minor threat that Tamar did not even deem it necessary to imprison him, a decision she may have later regretted due to subsequent events. Despite Tamar's pardon following his initial coup attempt, a leniency far exceeding what he deserved, Uri proceeded to orchestrate another rebellion against her, again unsuccessfully. One might expect he would learn from these failures, but apparently physical attractiveness does not necessarily correlate with intellectual acumen. However, one positive outcome did emerge from these coup attempts. Although Tamar was undeniably powerful, she was not single-handedly suppressing rebellions. One individual in particular demonstrated exceptional devotion to her: the handsome David Sultan, a prince, one of her aunt's protégés, and exceptionally skilled in combat. It was this latter attribute that would render David so invaluable to Tamar. Whether guided by personal inclination or strategic calculation to secure the most capable man by her side, Tamar ensured she married David as swiftly as possible, with their wedding taking place in 1189. Prince David would soon emphatically prove his loyalty to her in perhaps the most dramatically satisfying manner. Is there any fantasy more gratifying than vanquishing a former spouse in battle? Perhaps the fantasy of not even chipping a nail because your current husband accomplishes it for you. Indeed, Tamar's new husband, David, played a pivotal role in defeating Tamar's ex-husband, Uri, and his band of insurgents who had twice attempted to depose her. And this new power couple was only just beginning their reign. Tamar was a hands-on ruler, frequently riding alongside her troops, particularly relishing opportunities to deliver stirring orations to her subjects before they marched into battle on her behalf. Given her numerous military successes, these speeches were demonstrably highly motivational. In a testament to her character, Tamar also displayed remarkable generosity, distributing substantial sums of her wealth to those in need. Upon learning that a group of monks' living quarters had been destroyed by fire, she provided funds sufficient to dramatically improve their living conditions, including installing an irrigation system, constructing a mill, and establishing a large garden. However, even in acts of generosity, she subtly reminded people of her formidable nature. On one occasion, Tamar entrusted funds to be delivered to monks in Constantinople, only to discover that the Byzantine emperor at the time, Alexios III Angelos, had promptly seized the money for his own use. Her response was characteristically decisive. She set her sights on Angelos's territory in Trebizond, modern-day Turkey, and dispatched her army. Tamar did not neglect her monk beneficiaries amidst her military endeavors against the individual who had wronged them. Not only did she rescind the funds, but she also increased the amount beyond her initial offering. She may have harbored a premonition of success in this new territorial acquisition, as this time her ambitions were grander. Even the Byzantine emperor himself proved unable to obstruct Tamar's advance. She decisively defeated him and annexed a portion of his territory. In a strategic move, she then bestowed governance of this newly acquired region upon one of her younger cousins, who could then serve as her steadfast ally, further solidifying her network of power. Tamar did not require contemporary studies to demonstrate the beneficial effects of universal basic income on national well-being. She proactively redistributed wealth, allocating 10% of the nation's total wealth to the lower classes after first forgiving their outstanding debts. And these recipients were not merely receiving token amounts, they were receiving substantial benefits. There is ample reason why Queen Tamar's reign is referred to as Georgia's Golden Age. With the vast tributes flowing into the kingdom from conquered territories, Georgians lived in unprecedented prosperity. One observer noted, "The peasants were like nobles. the nobles like princes, and the princes like kings. However, her benevolence extended beyond mere financial generosity. Even Tamar, a figure comfortable leading armies and overseeing military campaigns, recognized that certain forms of punishment were inherently inhumane. She consequently abolished the most brutal torture methods, further enhancing her widespread popularity. Merciful and astute, Queen Tamar's relentless conquests during her prime began to unsettle some very powerful men. When a neighboring sultan, Saladin II, witnessed Tamar and David's continued successes, he grew so apprehensive that he dispatched a letter to Tamar. Sultan ended by asserting that, upon their surrender, Tamar could become his wife if she converted to Islam, or his concubine if she refused. Upon regaining consciousness, the Sultan's messenger returned and informed the Sultan that Tamar would not be surrendering. Then she enacted her true retribution. Why respond to a derogatory message with mere words when one can simply annihilate the sender? Queen Tamar's army, galvanized by yet another of her compelling speeches and led by her exceptionally capable husband David, decisively defeated Sultan Saladin II's army and annexed his territory. Most saints are canonized posthumously, but Queen Tamar was so deeply revered that she was actually declared a saint during her lifetime. Nonetheless, sainthood did not confer immortality, and her eventual death came as a profound shock to her people. Queen Tamar did not report ill one morning in 1213. She awoke and likely felt in good health, but by this time, she was 53 years old. While conducting a business meeting at her summer residence, Queen Tamar suddenly fell ill. This time there would be no triumphant recovery. 53 years of age seems relatively young by contemporary standards, but in the 12th century it was more akin to 75. Queen Tamar ultimately succumbed to her illness. Her final resting place was a monastery, fittingly, given her closer relationships with numerous monastic orders. However, to this day, the precise location of her burial remains unknown. Some speculate that her burial site was deliberately concealed. Scholars have searched, pilgrims have sought, and likely countless heartbroken medieval men have searched, yet no one has definitively located Queen Tamar's actual burial place. It is likely hidden away in a secret alcove somewhere within Jaladi Monastery, a site that coincidentally remains open to visitors today. The monastery stands intact 800 years later, and entrance is free. Thanks for watching History Exposed. If you love uncovering the best stories in history, hit like and subscribe to keep exploring with us.